Thank you. Good afternoon, and it's really a privilege and an honor to be here. I've been to Karlsruhe several times, and this place, ZKM, is my favorite place in the world, I think. So I'm like a lost child in a candy store when I come here. I think it's a very interesting topic that this conference has selected, and it's my favorite as well as a subject. There are themes that we are working on. I think worldwide we are facing with similar challenges, no matter which part of the world you belong, whether you're in the third world or the first world or any part. The world really is today at a crossroad where we are at tremendous challenges. Our recent elections, Donald Trump, Brexit, what's happened recently in France, is, to say the least, is surprising for many, even those who were in favor or not in favor of these candidates. So Trumpism, Brexism, all these things are happening, and what's common across many parts of the world is that the governments which are in the center seem to be struggling. You have the far left, which is coming up strong. So you saw that in the US elections, even with someone like Bernie Sanders. You have on the other side the far right coming in strong. And I think what needs to be understood is, to me personally at least, is that the voices need to be heard. We can't just ignore, or we can't be just polarized. We need to understand what's really behind this. Quite often we realize that it's one or two topics which are so, where people are so passionate about or concerned about, that these one or two topics can sway a decision completely in favor of one particular ideology. And this has resulted in polarized worlds. We are deeply divided. If you speak to people who are pro-Trump or pro-Hillary, you'll find these deep divides, and you can see that happening. I'm just using US as an example. In India, we're kind of heading towards that in some ways at the same time. What are the issues that we are facing? Whether you're a city, whether you're advanced or not, these are typical topics which I think are common to all. You have immigration. Immigration can mean different things to different people. People coming outside of a country, or even within the country, the immigration that's happening. The divide between the top 10% or top 2%, top 5%, and the rest of the country is strong. We see that in every part of the world. A lack of startups or entrepreneurship, which is now needed more than ever because of job insecurities, financial insecurities as a result of that. Your health systems, and most importantly, skilling. We are at a cusp, we are at a tipping point where suddenly on one side you have the millennials and the technology coming in so strongly. On the other side you have an aging population which seems to be now in that situation where one really doesn't know what to do. And sometimes I think it's very easy to say that technology is the answer to everything, and I don't believe that's entirely correct. So how do we do this? How do we solve these local problems? Do we do this in the traditional way where we are a country that we understand everything, we know our problems, we know our issues, so we can solve it? Well, if that was the case, then many countries would not be in difficulty the way they are today. So we got to now really look across the borders for solutions. And I think concepts like hackathons, which should be not restricted only to your city or your country, but should be really opened up worldwide. You're finding solutions which are now being accepted in each of us countries, whether it's a concept like an Airbnb or an Uber or whatever, where a concept which starts in another country finds a solution across the world. And I think this is increasing as we are facing with all sorts of situations. Typically in any city, state, there are these standard solution providers. It's either your government, your corporates, your judiciary, you have an NGO or an academician, you also have experts, but very rarely will we really see that you yourself, each member who's present in this audience, can be a solution provider. You either want to accept that it's somebody else's problem and somebody else should solve it, But very rarely do we really step up and say, this is my responsibility and I'm going to actually see what needs to be done. So how do you do this? How do you get yourself, you, me, as an individual to say, I'm going to be a part of the solution? We created a model which was slightly different than the traditional way of looking at things. I run a newspaper. We have newspapers and television as one of our businesses. And what we as a media typically all over the world we do is we are responsible for reporting what the facts are, what the truth is, what's happening. We need to tell that to the audiences. And pretty much the audiences are left to their own to decide what they feel out of that news item. We went a step ahead and we said, when we identify a problem, can we not look at actually now solving the problem ourselves as a media house, as a platform, as a foundation? And we established this model called as boardroom to grassroots. Quite often, I've been part of conferences where the top level, the elite of the society are discussing in conferences like these problems about somebody who is not present in the conference room. So I would be discussing problems about, say, the farmers or the poor or whatever, who may not be even present in the conference. And there was a disconnect between the boardroom and the grassroots. Quite often we assume a lot of things that this is what the people want and so on and so forth. We do surveys, and increasingly surveys are not proving to be accurate. You've seen that in the polls, for example. People are not necessarily telling what's really on their minds. So what do? We created a simple solution. We looked at a nation as nothing but a bunch of families put together. And how do families communicate with each other? Can we have, tomorrow, let's say, if a parent and child does not have a communication in a family, do we say, okay, here's WhatsApp, here's a mobile, here's a tool, download an app, and you can start communicating and you start finding answers? Doesn't work that way. You have to physically be able to communicate. And when you're looking at these sort of concepts, we said, can we create forums? Can we create groups of small people, like little families, 15 people, 10 people together in society, and teach them coming together like you have in a microfinance forum, and you basically ask them to discuss three things. What is the society's problem? Not your problem first, but the society, your community, where you're staying. What are the challenges and the issues? Second, your own family's issues. And third, your individual issues. So you start making people talk, people put them in a group and get these sort of inputs. We did this with women in my state. I run one of perhaps the largest number of, probably the biggest NGO for women in my state. We have impacted over 5-6 million women by now. Typically what happens in any society that women may be a part of the government or the corporate, but when I started discussing with about issues about women in the US, in Germany, the men had a completely different perspective and the women had a completely different perspective. And when I said to my German friends, who are males, they said, yeah, all this problem is in India. In Germany, the women are absolutely fine. There's no problem. There's gender equality and there's absolute, freedom and everything. When I spoke to the women, the very wife of this person, she said, he's talking rubbish. He doesn't know what the truth is. And I found that whether it's a village woman or a city woman or any part of the world, the issues are the same. It's absolutely the same. And what we did was, in a democracy typically, it's designed primarily from the male perspective. Even when we design a newspaper, it's designed primarily from a male perspective. Even if women are working in our governments or in our corporates, they have to behave like men. They have to think like men. And to succeed, you have to be more like a man. And that's what's being taught. And what we've done is we've removed the very essence of what the woman thinks and how she can solve problems. And we twisted that and we said, okay, can we use women as the core, as the center, to look at problems in a perspective which is a woman's perspective? And we found out that by putting them in groups of 10, 15, and addressing them to I highlight problems and issues of the entire society, then family, then individual, remarkable results came in. What resulted was very surprising. When we got village women, for example, 10, 15 of them put together, and we said, okay, what's the village's problem or the city's problem? They came and said, infrastructure. Okay, how do you solve this infrastructure problem? And they went about solving it in a manner which was unbelievable. We have over 20,000 now success stories where women have transformed villages, have transformed issues which could not be solved by men being in the government for over 60 years in India. Entrepreneurship, domestic abuse, all sorts of issues were being solved. And what was surprising for me also is that when they highlighted problems, typically for the man it was a woman will address maybe a domestic issue problem or something related to the woman. What was not expected that the woman was actually solving major problems which was affecting infrastructure and things like that. The second thing what we did was we got the youth involved. We have now, I run a student organization with about 1.7 million students as my members. And the key, what I realized was in a democracy, both women and the youth rarely get a chance to participate frequently. We go to vote once in 5 years. That's the best form of sort of participation. Some of us have the privilege to probably meet with the mayor or with the government officials, but majority don't really get connected to democracy as a system. So what we created was we created elections. It's like if you're a member of a Lions Club and you have an election or a Rotary or clubs like these, we created these organizations where we started conducting elections the way you would conduct in a democracy. And this resulted in something very unique. It started changing the mindset of the young and the old, where we want to participate and we want to solve issues. So these were things that now the students are elected. This is the elections that are happening across my state. We're conducted in phases where women are voting. And what happens is very interesting. We have now created a shadow government, which means that I have a real minister president and I have a woman minister president who gets elected from all these women voters. And she is now more powerful than actually the person who got elected. Because suddenly you have the whole society backing these women, and this program is done in a very simple manner. It's done in a way where it's not complicated. It can easily be replicated in any part of the world. And what that is doing is it is allowing the society at large to build a bridge with the government and reach out issues which are relevant and practical. So these are the elections that are being conducted. We took women from villages also. I'm focusing on villages here, but there's a city women's forum as well. But here what we did was we took cases from Harvard. What we learned in Harvard is something that we translated in the local language, and we taught them how to do that. So effectively, short courses on how to handle issues which are taught in management. If we teach the skill sets to the ordinary person, amazing results starts coming in. We're in a very interesting situation in my state. This is a real photo of 10 million plus people who were on the streets of my state protesting. They were protesting because there were no jobs, there were no educational opportunities, and this was a silent protest. One of the things that they said to the government is, we are not going to talk to you. So they were protesting without any demands, and they said, enough is enough, we don't trust any political party, we don't trust any politician, and we are on the street. We're upset with you, and you got to fix something. The government was worried, because on one side, you have a protest which is happening. On the other side, they're refusing to talk to the government, they don't trust them, so how do you solve this gridlock? And that's when we stepped in. The government asked me to sort of see if the leaders of this protest movement are willing to talk to me. And subsequently what happened was I invited them for a dialogue. We met, and the demands were simple. We need more jobs, we need better skill sets. So it was not very difficult. And we started a process now of actually finding out a company which in the world does mass scaling for USAID and World Bank and IFC competent skill sets. And we said, okay, how can we use this to transform the entire community? And what resulted was an amazing opportunity which now has become is becoming a successful model, where from protest it has gone to actually making a difference. I was in South Africa when I was invited by the South African government to speak similarly on what my experience was in India. At that point in time, there were students in South Africa protesting because they wanted fees to be lowered or free education. And I was talking to the people similar in the conference room and saying that the government cannot talk to them because they don't trust the government. But someone in the audience, someone like you, should actually take up the initiative and talk to these students. If you don't talk to these students, they don't have an outlet. And the key is you can't wait for the government and the bureaucracy and someone else to go and do the dialogue. You may have a credible platform. It could be a media house, it could be a foundation, it could be an educational institute, it could be anything. Somebody needs to talk to them other than the regular people that are expected to talk. And this became a very, very sort of a successful. Finally, my minister president, I arranged meetings very secretly, where the leaders met, and now we're working on a whole budget planning where how do we divert these schemes and the budgets for the benefit of the society. So the key was, again, skilling. I remember one of my favorite places in the world is Israel, and I go there quite often, and we have a partnership with Zohar here, who will be speaking after me any which ways, where I found that the education system in Israel is unbelievable. Right from the children's at 4 and 5 years old, I went to their nursery and Montessori systems. I saw the universities, I saw the colleges. I think what they're doing is unbelievable. The way they're skilling and preparing for the 21st century, 22nd century, in fact, is awesome. And what we did was we tied up with these universities and we said, can we get these courses, can we get these amazing learnings and impart it to the Indian students in a very short span? In fact, my daughter is now 16 and she wants to do business. And one of the key things in India is, if you want to start a business, you don't know how to do it. I'm an engineer, but nobody taught me how to do business as an engineer. And I asked my German friends, like in KIT or anywhere else, when you're studying, do you know if you want to start a business, how do you do business? The answer is, well, we really don't know. There are some startup funds and we have a template, but we really don't know how to do it. But in Israel and in the US, there's a course where in 3 months, for 3 weeks, if you attend for these 13 to 16-year-olds, you're actually equipped to start a business almost immediately. And it's connected to the Silicon Valley. It's an amazing course. So we started importing these sort of concepts where in a very short span, how do you skill even people who are above 60, above 70? You can't look at the aging population and the youngsters as a liability. You have to look at them as an asset. And I found that a whole bunch of now new programs that we can actually create have become very interesting. So this is something that we inspire. And some of you actually you should Google this Catapult. IDC Herzliya is one of the most amazing universities in Israel. And the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation. Alan Gray is one of the richest, or probably the richest South Africans. And he has this foundation. What he's done is, from the 6th grade till you're 35, he has a scholarship fellowship program, which we are now replicating in India, as to how to identify students who can potentially be leaders. How do you teach leadership? The key is leadership. I think what's really lacking in society is leadership, and how do you teach that very quickly in a very compact manner. So this is something that we are now launching in India as well. So the key, like I said, how do you get all these people together? How do you get the NGOs, the corporates, the judiciary, the politicians, all of them under one roof? And we found a system, we designed a process, we call it the lab, where we can actually get this consensus building mechanism, and we now offer that as a service to other presidents and prime ministers of the world, including my prime minister. We have a joint venture with the Prime Minister's Office of Malaysia. He's an acting prime minister, so it's always helpful that you know someone who's actually running a country, active bureaucracy, and how do you take those learnings and then impart it into other countries. So that's a program that we are now working on. Effectively, you create what we call as a state transformation office, where we get women, we get youth, we get everybody together, and in a very, very stipulated time frame. I realize one thing: most politicians get elected for their term, and they really want progress in their term. The objective for them is ultimately to get re-elected. So if you give them a 20-year plan, they're listening, but not really listening. They're looking at the next term. So how do you create a program which in 3 to 5 years, whatever is the term of the politician, can give serious results on the ground? And that's the program that we've developed. In Malaysia, in fact, they attracted $444 billion of investment. They created this thing where in 3 to 5 years, they were able to transform education and a whole bunch of other things in a very, very planned and phased manner. And that's the process now that we are exporting elsewhere. So in conclusion, what we do is we help build smart cities, smart villages with the right sort of partnerships that we have in place. We have an advisory section where we work with governments, we work with various stakeholders. We consult, but we not only consult, we also do funding. We have a program where we work with sovereign funds, we work with other funding agencies. We ourselves are now launching, in partnership with the world's biggest impact fund to help startups and businesses generally, and how do you get them together? In fact, one of the programs that we are launching is a program between India, Israel, and Germany, where we identify startups based out of Israel and Germany and India, combine the three, because India has a market, Israel has the access and a network to the Silicon Valley, and Germans, as you know, are brilliant at process and engineering. So if you combine these strengths, I think it can be a huge opportunity. So that's another area that we are now launching. And obviously the skilling that is required. With this, I'm hoping that we can deliver a better solution and a better society. And the reason I'm really here is that if there's anything that I would love to do in this country, if there's any help, we've been working with the Lord Mayor of Karlsruhe and his team, and they've got a wonderful team. I'm sure the city is going to be a model and an example for the whole country to follow. And once you hear Zohar, I think you'll be convinced that that is going to be a reality. Thank you.